Hey everyone, this is my first time posting, and honestly, I don't even know where to begin. My name is Max, 36, and up until a few days ago, I thought I had a solid life. I've been married to my wife Camila for 6 years, and while no marriage is perfect, I truly believed we were happy. Turns out, I was wrong. So wrong it feels like my whole world flipped overnight. I came home early from a business trip last Friday. It was supposed to be a celebration. I just closed a big deal at work, one I'd been chasing for months. So I thought, why not surprise Camila? The plan was to take her out to dinner, maybe even spend the weekend somewhere nice, just the two of us. I was even holding flowers when I pulled into our driveway. But as I parked, I noticed something odd, a sleek black luxury car parked right in front of our house. We live in a quiet neighborhood, mostly families and retirees, and the sight of such a flashy car stuck out like a sore thumb. At first, I thought it might be a delivery guy or a neighbor's friend, but then I spotted the plates, out of state. My stomach did this weird flip, but I shook it off. I mean, who could it be? Maybe Camila had a friend over, right? But as I got closer to the house, I saw a pair of men's shoes by the door. Expensive ones. Definitely not mine. That's when the doubts started. I stood there on the porch for what felt like forever, trying to think of a reason, any reason, that made sense. Then I heard laughter, hers clear as day, coming from upstairs. I can't even describe what that sound did to me. My heart sank, but my legs carried me into the house anyway. I set the flowers on the counter and climbed the stairs, each step louder in my ears than the last. The laughter got quieter, but it was still there, and so was another voice, a man's voice. When I reached the bedroom, the door was slightly open. I didn't even have to push it all the way to see them, Camila, wrapped in our sheets, and some guy I'd never seen before. They didn't even notice me at first. I stood there, frozen, as if my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. And then she saw me. Her face went pale, and she stammered, "Max. It's not what it looks like." But how could it not be? I just stood there, feeling like the ground beneath me had disappeared. My wife, my Camila, was in our bed with a man I didn't recognize, and all she could manage was, "It's not what it looks like." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to do something, but all I could do was stand there like a statue. The guy, he had the audacity to pull on his pants like he was the victim in this situation. He wouldn't even look at me, just grabbed his shirt from the chair by the window and muttered, "I should go." And Camila? She didn't try to stop him. Didn't even glance his way. Her focus was on me, her eyes wide and fake tears starting to pool. "Max, I can explain," she said, like that would magically erase the scene in front of me. I found my voice, barely. "Explain what, Camila? That you're sleeping with someone else in our bed? Is that what this is?" She shook her head, stepping closer to me. "It's not like that. You don't understand. He means nothing to me." The guy scoffed from the doorway but didn't say anything. He slipped out of the room, leaving us alone in the tension-filled silence. I felt a lump in my throat, and for a second, I thought I might cry. But instead, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let her twist this into something smaller than what it was. "How long?" I asked, my voice colder than I thought it could be. She flinched like I'd hit her. It was a mistake, Max. I swear. I didn't mean for this to happen." "That's not an answer," I shot back, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. "How long?" Camila hesitated, biting her lip like she was debating how much to tell me. Finally, she whispered, "A few months." "A few months." I laughed, this bitter hollow laugh that didn't feel like it came from me. "So what? While I was working late, while I was on business trips, you were doing this? With him?" Her face crumpled, and she started crying, but it didn't move me. "Not this time. I didn't want you to find out like this." Find out like this?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You didn't want me to find out at all, Camila. That's the point, isn't it?" She tried to reach for my hand, but I stepped back, shaking my head. "Don't. Just don't." I walked out of the bedroom without another word, my head spinning. Camila followed me, her voice trailing behind. "Max, please, let's talk. It's not as bad as it looks." Not as bad? I didn't even know how to process that. My wife was begging me to stay calm, like I'd overreacted or misunderstood the situation. But how do you misunderstand that? I grabbed my coat from the hook by the door, but my hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. "We're not doing this right now," I said without turning around. "I need to think." Her voice cracked as she called after me, "Where are you going? Don't leave like this, Max." But I didn't answer. I couldn't. I needed air, space, anything but her. I opened the door, slammed it shut behind me, and got into my car. As I drove aimlessly around town, 1,000 questions flooded my mind. Who was that guy? How did they meet? How many times had this happened? Had she lied to my face every day while telling me she loved me? The worst part was, I started doubting myself. Did I miss the signs? Was I too distracted with work to notice? Had I been a bad husband? No. This wasn't on me. Whatever issues we had, this wasn't the answer. I pulled into an empty parking lot and just sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The image of Camila and that man, of them, was burned into my mind. I felt this sick knot in my stomach, like I might throw up. My phone buzzed, breaking me out of the spiral. A text from Camila. "Please come home. We need to talk. I'll explain everything." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. Explain? What was there to explain? The betrayal was plain as day. But another part of me, the one that had loved her for 6 years, whispered, maybe there's more to the story. Maybe you owe her a chance to explain herself. Against my better judgment, I started the car and headed back home. I didn't respond to her. I couldn't. The word love, coming from her, felt cheap, hollow, like it didn't mean anything anymore. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe in that room any longer. "I need to get out of here," I muttered, mostly to myself. Camila shot up from the bed, panic all over her face. "Wait, Max. Please. Don't go. Let's talk about this. We can fix it." "Fix it?" I repeated, shaking my head as I turned toward the door. "You don't fix something like this, Camila. You broke it. You destroyed everything we had, and now you want to talk about fixing it." I heard her footsteps following me as I made my way down the stairs, but I didn't look back. My thoughts were racing, my heart pounding in my ears. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. "Max, please," she cried, grabbing my arm as I reached for the door. "Don't leave like this. Just give me a chance to explain, to make it right." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her tear-streaked face. For a moment, I thought about all the good memories we'd shared, our wedding day, the vacations, the late nights laughing over nothing. It made the betrayal cut even deeper. "Let go, Camila," I said quietly, my voice barely holding together. She didn't move, her grip tightening. "If you walk out that door, I don't know if we'll come back from this. Is that what you want? To throw everything away over one mistake?" I turned to face her fully, and the anger I'd been holding back finally bubbled to the surface. "One mistake? Don't insult me, Camila. This wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. A choice you made over and over again for months. You didn't just betray me, you lied to me, disrespected me, and now you want me to act like it's something we can brush under the rug." She started sobbing again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. Not this time. Not after what I'd seen. I pulled my arm free and opened the door. "Max, where are you going?" she pleaded, her voice breaking. I paused for a second, not even sure myself. Anywhere but here. And with that I walked out, leaving her standing in the doorway as the cold air hit my face. Soon as I stepped outside, the cool air hit me, but it didn't do much to calm the storm in my head. I got into my car and just sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there in that house with her. The same house we'd picked out together, decorated together, built a life in. Now it felt like a stranger's home. I started the car and pulled out of the driveway, barely noticing the black luxury car still parked on the street. It was like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, sitting there, mocking me. I resisted the urge to slam into it out of spite. The streets were quiet, the faint glow of streetlights reflecting off the wet pavement from an earlier drizzle. I drove aimlessly, letting the hum of the engine fill the silence in my head. My thoughts, though, wouldn't quiet down. How long had this been going on? How many nights had I kissed her goodbye before a trip, not knowing she was probably planning to invite him over? Had she ever regretted it? Or was it only regret now that she'd been caught? I felt my phone buzzing in my pocket. I knew who it was without even looking. Camila, probably calling to say more empty words, more lies. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Finally, I pulled into an empty parking lot and grabbed my phone. 5 missed calls and 3 texts, all from her. Max, please come home. We need to talk. I love you. Please don't let this ruin everything we've built. Where are you? I'm scared for you. The audacity of that last one made me laugh, this dry, humorless laugh that echoed in the car. She's scared for me? No, she was scared for herself, for what this meant for her comfortable life. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying the scene in the bedroom, the sound of her voice trying to justify the unjustifiable. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, trying to figure out what to do next. I could go to a hotel, but the thought of sitting alone in a sterile room didn't appeal to me. I could call someone, but who? Who would I even tell? That's when I realized how isolating this was. The person I would normally turn to for comfort, for advice, was the one who'd torn me apart, sitting in that empty parking lot. I felt a strange mix of anger, sadness, and just pure exhaustion. My phone buzzed again, and I glanced at it. Another call from Camila. I couldn't deal with her voice right now. Instead, I scrolled through my contacts, looking for someone to talk to. My thumb hovered over a few names. My brother, an old college friend, but I hesitated. How do you even start a conversation like this? Hey, guess what? My wife's been cheating on me. Then I saw Logan's name. He was my closest friend from way back, the kind of guy who dropped everything to help me move, who knew my life inside out. If there was anyone I could call, it was him. I hit dial, and after a few rings, he picked up. Max? What's up, man? I thought you were out of town. Hearing his voice felt like a lifeline, but it also made the weight of everything hit me even harder. My throat tightened, and for a second, I couldn't speak. Max? You there? Logan asked, sounding concerned now. Yeah, I croaked. I'm here. I need to talk to someone. What's going on? He asked, his tone shifting to serious. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. It's Camila. She's been cheating on me. There was a pause, and then, what? Are you serious? Yeah, I said, my voice shaky. I walked in on her. Tonight. With some guy. In our house. Logan let out a low whistle. Man. I don't even know what to say. Are you okay? No, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. I don't even know what to think right now. I had to get out of there. I'm sitting in some random parking lot, trying to figure out what to do. Okay, he said firmly, switching into problem-solving mode. First of all, you don't stay in that house tonight. Do you want to come crash here? I've got the couch, or you can take the guest room. The thought of being around someone familiar, someone who wasn't Camila, was more comforting than I expected. Yeah, that'd be good. Thanks, man. Anytime, Logan said. Where are you? I'll text you my address. It didn't take long for Logan to send me his address. I hadn't been to his place in a while, but I remembered it was on the other side of town, a good 20-minute drive. The time alone in the car gave me too much space to think, though. I replayed the entire evening in my head, over and over. The laughter I'd heard from the driveway. The shoes by the door. The look on Camila's face when she saw me standing in the doorway. Every detail felt sharper, like my brain was punishing me by reliving it. When I pulled into Logan's driveway, he was already outside, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. He waved as I parked, his expression serious but calm. Hey man, he said as I got out of the car. You look like you've been through hell. I feel like it, I muttered, grabbing my overnight bag from the trunk. I'd thrown it together before I left the house, mostly out of habit. Logan led me inside, and the warmth of his living room hit me. It was a cozy space, simple but welcoming, with a couch that had clearly seen better days and a coffee table cluttered with old magazines and an empty pizza box. Sit, he said, gesturing to the couch. Do you want a beer? Water? Something stronger. Beer's fine, I said, sinking into the couch. It felt like the first solid thing I'd sat on all night. Logan disappeared into the kitchen and came back with 2 beers, handing me one before sitting in the armchair across from me. He cracked his open and took a sip, watching me carefully. So, he said after a moment, you want to tell me what happened? I took a long swig of beer, trying to figure out where to start. I came home early from my trip. I thought it'd be a nice surprise, you know? But when I got there was this car in the driveway. A nice car, out-of-state plates. Logan frowned but didn't interrupt, letting me keep going. I went inside and I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. I found her. With some guy. In our bedroom. Logan let out a low breath, shaking his head. Man, I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine how that must have felt. It was like the floor dropped out from under me, I said, staring down at the beer bottle in my hands. She tried to explain, but it was all lies. She said it was a mistake, that it didn't mean anything. But then she admitted it had been going on for months. Months. Logan echoed, his voice rising. She was sneaking around behind your back for months, and now she's acting like it was just some one-time thing? Exactly, I said bitterly. I don't even know how to wrap my head around it. I don't know how I didn't see it coming. Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You can't blame yourself for this, Max. She's the one who did this, not you. You were working your butt off to give her a good life, and she threw it away. I nodded, but his words didn't bring much comfort. The betrayal still felt raw, like an open wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. Logan sat with me well into the night, letting me vent while occasionally tossing in a comment or question. It helped, but there were moments when I could feel my emotions bubbling to the surface, threatening to overwhelm me. What do I even do now? I asked at one point, leaning back against the couch and staring at the ceiling. Do I pack her stuff? File for divorce? Do I confront that guy? I don't even know where to start. Logan rubbed the back of his neck, clearly thinking. First off, don't do anything rash. You're still in the middle of this storm, and it's hard to make good decisions when you're feeling like this. Take a couple of days to breathe. Breathe, I echoed with a humorless laugh. Easier said than done. He nodded. Yeah, I get that. But you've got to try. The last thing you want is to make a decision you'll regret later, especially if things get messy legally. I hadn't even thought about the legal side of it. The idea of splitting assets, dividing lives, it all felt so far away, but I knew it was coming. You think I should talk to a lawyer? I asked. Eventually, Logan said. But right now? Focus on getting your head on straight. And don't let her manipulate you. If she's already lying about this, she'll probably try to spin it to save herself. That hit me hard. I hadn't told Logan everything yet, but his words reminded me of the last thing Camila had said before I left. She told me she loved me, I muttered, staring at the label on my beer bottle. She said she wanted to fix things. Logan raised an eyebrow. You believe her? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe it. I mean, we've been through so much together. I thought we were happy. But another part of me. I just can't trust anything she says right now. And you shouldn't, Logan said firmly. Not after what she's done. Love isn't just words, Max. It's actions. And her actions? They don't match her words at all. I nodded, but the doubt still lingered in the back of my mind. Was it possible she really did love me, despite everything? Or was that just something she said to keep me from walking away completely? As the night dragged on, exhaustion finally started to catch up with me. Logan noticed and stood up, grabbing the empty beer bottles from the table. Guest room's ready whenever you are, he said, giving me a small supportive smile. Thanks, man, I said, meaning it. I don't know what I'd do without you right now. He shrugged. That's what friends are for. The next morning, I woke up feeling disoriented, the events of the previous night rushing back as soon as I opened my eyes. I was in Logan's guest room, the sunlight streaming through the blinds. For a second, I thought about staying in bed, pretending none of it had happened. But reality didn't work that way. I dragged myself up and headed into the kitchen, where Logan was already making coffee. The smell was comforting, even if my mind wasn't. Morning, he said, glancing up from his mug. How'd you sleep? I shrugged, sitting down at the kitchen table. I don't even know. Everything feels like a blur. He nodded, sliding a cup of coffee across to me. That's normal. It's gonna take time to process all of this. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the hum of the fridge and the occasional sip of coffee. It was weird, this quiet moment, knowing my entire life had been turned upside down. Finally, Logan broke the silence. What's the plan for today? I stared into my cup, my mind racing. I don't know. I feel like I should go back to the house, but the thought of seeing her. I can't deal with that yet. Do you have to? He asked. Why not give yourself another day or two? You're not ready to face her, Max, and that's okay. I just don't want her to think I'm avoiding it, you know? I said. Like I'm running away. You're not running away, Logan said firmly. You're giving yourself space to figure things out. And honestly? She's the one who should be worried about facing you, not the other way around. His words made sense, but they didn't make the decision any easier. Part of me felt like I needed to confront her, to demand answers and make her understand what she'd done. But another part of me, the exhausted, broken part, just wanted to stay away for as long as possible. Maybe you're right, I said finally. Maybe I just need more time. Logan nodded. Good. Take today to clear your head. And if you need to crash here again tonight, you're more than welcome. I thanked him, grateful for his support, but the thought of staying away from my own home for too long made me feel uneasy. It wasn't just about Camila, it was about me. My life. My space. As the morning went on, I started making a list in my head, things I needed to do, steps I needed to take. It wasn't much, but it was a start to be why mid-morning. I decided I couldn't keep avoiding the house. As much as I dreaded going back, it felt like something I had to do, not for Camila, but for myself. I needed to reclaim my space, even if it meant facing her again. I'm heading home, I told Logan as I grabbed my keys. You sure about that? He asked, concern in his voice. Not really, I admitted, but I can't hide out forever. I'll just grab some stuff and see how it goes. Logan didn't argue, just gave me a firm pat on the shoulder. If it gets to be too much, call me. I'll come over, no questions asked. Thanks, man, I said, meaning it. The drive back felt like stepping into enemy territory. Every mile closer to the house made my stomach twist, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt like I'd run a marathon. The luxury car was gone, at least. That was something. But the sight of the house that had once felt like my sanctuary, now felt foreign. I sat in the car for a while, debating whether to go in. Eventually, I forced myself to open the door and step out. The front door was locked, which meant Camila was either gone or waiting inside. I wasn't sure which one I preferred. When I stepped inside, the silence hit me first. No laughter, no sounds of someone moving around. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The flowers I'd brought home yesterday were still on the counter, their petals drooping slightly. I glanced around, half expecting Camila to come rushing down the stairs, but the house was empty. Relief mixed with disappointment, though I couldn't explain why. I headed upstairs to grab a few things, a change of clothes, some essentials. Walking into the bedroom felt like stepping onto a battlefield. The bed was neatly made, but I could still see it in my mind, Camila and that guy, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. My chest tightened, and I turned away, heading to the closet to grab a duffel bag. That's when I noticed something, a small pile of Camila's things sitting on her side of the dresser. A folded note sat on top. It had my name on it, her eyes scanned my face like she was trying to read my mood, but I wasn't giving her anything. I set my keys down on the counter and stayed by the door, keeping as much space between us as I could. Max, she started again, her voice trembling. I know you're angry. I don't blame you. But please, can we talk? I need you to understand. Understand what, Camila? I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. That you've been lying to me for months? That you brought another man into our home, our bed? What exactly am I supposed to understand here? She looked like she wanted to cry again, but I wasn't falling for it this time. I was done letting her tears soften me. I know I hurt you, she said, taking a hesitant step toward me. I made a terrible mistake, Max. But I love you. I never stopped loving you. Stop saying that. I snapped, taking a step back. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. Love isn't sneaking around and betraying the person you're supposed to be committed to. Love is respect, honesty, loyalty. And you threw all of that away. She cringed, her shoulders slumping like my words had physically hit her. You're right, she whispered. I don't have any excuses. But Max, I'm begging you, please don't let this be the end of us. We can work through this. We can go to therapy, we can... Therapy. I laughed bitterly, cutting her off. You think therapy is going to fix this? That sitting in a room with a stranger and talking about our feelings is going to erase what you did. She didn't answer, her lip trembling as she stared at me. For a moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. I'm not here to fix this, Camila, I said finally, my voice cold. I'm here to figure out my next steps. Because whatever this is now, it's not a marriage anymore. Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Please, she sobbed. Don't do this. Don't leave me. I'll do anything to make it right. But her words felt empty. They were just noise, drowning in the chaos she'd created. Her sobs filled the room, but they didn't move me the way they might have before. I stayed near the door, keeping my distance, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. I needed to stay focused, not get swept up in her guilt. You don't get it, Camila, I said after a long pause. This isn't something you can fix. You didn't just make a mistake, you made a series of choices that led to this. And now you want me to believe that it all meant nothing? That you still love me? How do you expect me to believe anything you say? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Because it's the truth, she pleaded. I was stupid, Max. I let myself get caught up in something that never should have happened. But it's over now, I ended it before you even found out. Yeah. I said bitterly. Sure looked over to me when I walked in on you too. Her face flushed, and she looked away, guilt written all over her. That wasn't supposed to happen, she muttered. No kidding, I said, my voice cold. But it did. And now I'm the one left picking up the pieces while you're sitting here asking me to understand. She stood up suddenly, crossing the room toward me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice shaking. But I'm asking for it anyway. I love you, Max. You're my husband, my partner, and I can't lose you. Please, just give me a chance to make this right. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, to cling to the idea that our marriage wasn't completely over. But another part of me, the part that couldn't forget the image of her in our bed with someone else, was screaming at me to walk away. I don't know if I can do that, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away, shaking my head. Don't, I said. I need space, Camila. I need time to figure out what comes next. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, stepping back. Okay, she said quietly. I'll give you space. But please, don't shut me out completely. I don't want to lose you. I didn't respond. I turned and walked up the stairs, heading to the guest room to grab a few more things. I wasn't ready to move back into my home, not yet upstairs. The house felt eerily quiet. As I walked into the guest room to grab a change of clothes and a few essentials, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at the photos on the wall. Pictures of us from happier times, vacations, anniversaries, and moments that used to mean everything. It felt surreal. How had we gone from that to this? I stared at one photo in particular, a candid shot of us laughing on the beach during a trip to Mexico. Her smile had been so genuine, so full of life. It was hard to reconcile that version of Camila with the one who had betrayed me. I shook my head, forcing myself to look away. I wasn't going to let nostalgia cloud my judgment. The person in those photos wasn't the person I'd confronted last night. As I packed, I heard a soft knock on the door. Max. Camila's voice was tentative, barely audible. I sighed, debating whether to answer. What? The door creaked open slightly, and she peeked in, her eyes red and puffy. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond, keeping my focus on folding a shirt. She stepped inside, hesitating near the door. I know you don't believe me, and I don't blame you. But I meant what I said, I want to make this right. Camila, I said, turning to face her, you can say sorry all you want, but that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't erase what you did. I know, she said quickly. I know that. But if you'll just let me explain, really explain, you might understand why. Why what? I snapped, cutting her off. Why you thought it was okay to betray me? To lie to my face for months? What could you possibly say that would make this any better? She opened her mouth, then closed it, struggling for words. I was lonely, she whispered finally. I let out a bitter laugh. Lonely? That's your excuse? I was out there working to build a life for us, and you were lonely? So you decided to fill that void with someone else. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice breaking. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But it didn't mean I stopped loving you. Stop saying that, I said, my voice cold. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. She looked down, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. You can't, I said simply. That's the problem. You can't undo what's been done. I grabbed my bag and walked past her without another word. I stood at the top of the stairs for what felt like an eternity, my mind swirling with memories and unanswered questions. As much as I wanted to leave, I couldn't. Not yet. If I walked away without knowing the full truth, it would haunt me. I needed to confront her, to force her to say out loud what she had done. When I finally made my way downstairs, she was on the couch, staring blankly at her phone. Her shoulders were hunched, and she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like the guilt was physically weighing her down. The moment she noticed me, she sat up straight, her face shifting to something between hope and dread. Max, she said softly, her voice breaking. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I walked to the center of the room and turned to face her, crossing my arms over my chest. I need the truth, Camila. All of it. No more dodging, no more excuses. I want to know who he is, how it started, and why you thought this was okay. She flinched at the sharpness in my voice, but she nodded slowly. Okay, she whispered. I'll tell you everything. Just, please sit down. I'm fine standing, I said coldly, keeping my distance. She hesitated, then drew in a shaky breath. His name is Victor, she began. He's a client from work. We met at a networking event about 8 months ago. 8 months, I repeated, the number hitting me like a punch to the gut. That was almost our entire last year together. It wasn't anything at first, she said quickly, as if trying to minimize the damage. He was charming, I guess, and he started stopping by the office. He'd bring coffee, little things like that. At first it felt harmless. But it wasn't harmless, was it? I said, my voice cutting through her explanation like a knife. No, she admitted, looking down at her hands. It wasn't. He asked me to lunch one day, and I went. I told myself it was just a friendly thing, that it didn't mean anything. But then he started saying things about how beautiful I was, how he admired me. And you liked it, I said, the bitterness in my tone unmistakable. She nodded reluctantly. Yes. I liked it. I felt, noticed. I felt wanted. But I didn't think it would go any further. But it did, I said, staring at her. Didn't it? Her lip trembled, and she nodded again. It started with one kiss, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt so guilty afterward. I told him it couldn't happen again, but it did. And before I knew it, Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. You slept with him, I said flatly, finishing the sentence she couldn't bring herself to say. Yes, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. It happened a few times. 6 or 7, maybe. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. 6 or 7 times. This wasn't some fleeting moment of weakness. It was a pattern, a conscious choice she'd made again and again. Why didn't you stop? I demanded, my voice rising. Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around behind my back? I don't know, she cried, looking up at me, her face streaked with tears. I was scared, Max. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I thought I could keep it separate, that it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? I echoed, laughing bitterly. It meant enough for you to risk our marriage, to risk everything we built together. So don't stand there and tell me it didn't mean anything. She sobbed harder, clutching at the couch cushions like they could anchor her. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But it's over now. I ended it before you found out. Did you? I shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it doesn't look over. I walked in on you too, Camila. That doesn't scream over to me. Her face crumpled, and she buried her face in her hands again. I don't know what to say, she choked out. Try saying the truth, I snapped. Why did you let this happen? Were you planning to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying until I found out on my own? She didn't answer, and her silence told me everything I needed to know. Unbelievable, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. You didn't just betray me, Camila. You made a fool out of me. Do you even realize what you've done? I do, she said, looking up at me with desperation in her eyes. And I hate myself for it. But Max, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I let out a bitter laugh. You keep saying that, but do you even know what love is? Because this isn't love, Camila. This is selfishness. She flinched, but I kept going. You didn't think about me, or us, or what this would do to our marriage. You only thought about yourself. And now you're standing here asking me to forgive you, to fix something you broke beyond repair. She got up from the couch and took a tentative step toward me. Max, please. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you. Give me a chance to make this right. We can go to therapy, rebuild what we had. I'll do anything. I shook my head, taking a step back. You don't get it, do you? You didn't just hurt me, you destroyed the foundation of everything we built together. How am I supposed to come back from that? Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, but I pulled away. I need space, I said firmly. I need time to figure out what comes next. Because whatever this is now, it's not a marriage anymore. I turned and grabbed my bag, heading for the door. Her sobs echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. As I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, the cool air hit my face like a slap. For the first time in hours, I felt like I could breathe again walking to my car. I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me, but there was also a strange sense of clarity settling in. The cold evening air stung my skin, yet it felt grounding, like a reset button after hours of chaos. I tossed my bag into the back seat and slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel. For a moment, I didn't start the car. I just sat there, staring at the house where my life had come undone. Memories flashed through my mind, Camila and I decorating the living room for Christmas, hosting friends for dinner, laughing in the kitchen while trying to cook. Now, all of that felt tainted, like the foundation of those memories had been ripped out from under me. As I started the car and drove away, I realized I didn't have a clear destination. Logan had offered his place again, and while the thought of his steady presence was comforting, I felt like I needed to be alone. To think. To process. I ended up pulling into a quiet park I used to visit when I needed to clear my head. The lot was empty, and the dim glow of the streetlights gave the place a serene, almost surreal atmosphere. I parked, got out, and sat on a bench near the edge of the small lake. The water was still, reflecting the faint light of the moon. It was the kind of calm I desperately needed, even if my mind was far from quiet. As I sat there, I replayed Camila's words over and over. The excuses, the confessions, the promises to make things right. And then there were my own emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, confusion. But somewhere in the middle of all that, a strange clarity started to form. This wasn't about what she wanted anymore. It wasn't about her promises to fix things or her pleas for forgiveness. This was about me, about what I needed, what I deserved. And I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't go back to her. Even if she meant every word she'd said, and that was a big if, the damage was too deep. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces that couldn't be put back together. I would never look at her the same way again, and that wasn't the kind of life I wanted for myself. I thought about the kind of man I wanted to be, the kind of future I wanted to have. Camila had been a huge part of my life, but she didn't define it. I couldn't let her betrayal dictate the rest of my story. As the hours passed, the numbness I'd felt since walking into that bedroom began to lift, replaced by a quiet determination. I couldn't control what had happened, but I could control what happened next. By the time I got back into my car, I had made my decision. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room, sunlight streaming through the curtains. It felt strange, waking up alone in an unfamiliar place, but it also felt like a step forward. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the missed calls and messages from Camila. There were dozens, all variations of the same thing: apologies, pleas for forgiveness, declarations of love. I read through a few, then set the phone down. Her words didn't move me anymore. They felt like echoes from another life, one I was no longer a part of. Instead of responding, I made a different call, to a lawyer. It wasn't an easy call to make, but it was necessary. I didn't want to drag this out or leave any room for second-guessing. Camila had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The lawyer was understanding and straightforward, walking me through the steps to file for divorce. It felt surreal, like I was talking about someone else's life, but I knew it was the right decision. Over the next few days, I started taking the first steps to rebuild. I stayed with Logan for a bit, and he helped me pack up some of my things from the house while Camila was at work. I didn't want another confrontation, another round of tears and guilt. I also reached out to a therapist, not because I thought it would fix anything with Camila, but because I knew I needed help processing everything. The betrayal, the anger, the loss. It was too much to carry alone. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the grief hit me out of nowhere, like when I saw an old photo of us or heard a song that reminded me of her. But each day, the pain felt a little less sharp, a little less overwhelming. 6 months later, I was in a completely different place, physically, emotionally, and mentally. The divorce was finalized, and I'd moved into a new apartment. It wasn't as big or as fancy as the house, but it was mine, and that made it feel like home. Camila had reached out a few times during those months, but I kept my distance. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the same way. I didn't hate her. If anything, I pitied her. She'd lost more than just our marriage. She'd lost my trust, my respect, and any chance of being part of my future. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new place, sipping a beer and watching the sunset, I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect. Not completely healed. But okay. And that was enough. I'd learned a hard lesson about love, trust, and resilience, and I knew I'd carry that with me for the rest of my life. But I also knew that this was just one chapter in my story. The rest was still unwritten.